We are recording
the button is flashing.
Yeah, it's got a little red button flashing. So welcome to everyone who is joining us to this East Yorkshire Badger Protection Group webinar. My name's Dawn and I am the tech support for this session. I'm laughing because I'm really not tech support and this is the first time I've managed Zoom webinar, but we're all volunteers and we're all doing what we can here. So bear with us with any technical hitches or, you know, it's not a Newsnight presentation of seamless questions and switching back between presenters. Bear with us. Thank you very much. Just a couple of things to tell you and then I will disappear from the screen. I am not one of the panelists, I am helping out. So I do work for the Badger Trust, so I'm just helping one of the groups with this tonight. And it's great to be here and have you all in the room. We've got 40 people watching as well as the panelists at the minute. And we've got quite a few more people who I think are probably going to join slightly later. Okay, things to tell you. So we are recording this session. We're recording it so that we can make it available on demand after the event so that more people can access it. So just be aware that we are recording. It is possible to ask questions. Please use the Q&A function, which you should see at the bottom of your screen. If you can't see it right now, then if you just hover towards the bottom, it should be viewable. If you submit a question there, I will have my eyes on the questions and I'll try and pull a few out for us to answer as we go along. We're going to have about an hour and a half, so we'll do our best on questions. We won't be able to answer all of them, but we'll do our best, and some may be answered while we're talking as we go. It is possible to chat, so you can chat to each other if you want to do that in the sidebar. So if you see someone's name that you know and you want to say hello to them, you can, but that is not where your questions will get answered. And pretty much that is it. So I will turn my video off and hand over to Siobhan to present this on behalf of the East Yorkshire Badger Protection Group. Over to you, Siobhan.
Hi and welcome to everybody. It's absolutely delightful that so many of you have bothered to come out and attend this meeting. I'm presenting this on behalf of the East Yorkshire Badger Protection Group. And we are based in North East Yorkshire, and we cover a large area all the way down to York and to the Humber. Our subject for discussion tonight is how can we best protect our badgers? We've got a wonderful panel of speakers. We've got Debbie, we've got Graham, we've got Craig and Dom from the Badger Trust, and we've got Ian who will join us at 7:30. Amanda is going to act as co-host, and she is from the Badger Trust. Like myself, we are both volunteer trustees of Badger Trust, and she is going to try to make sure that everything runs smoothly and that most of your questions, or at least a good number of your questions, will be answered. So I think we'll start now with each of our panelists can give a little introduction about what they would, their particular subject and their aspect of how best we can protect our badgers. So over to who would like to start? Debbie, perhaps. Shall we start with Debbie?
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. So yeah, we're delighted that we can have this discussion tonight. My name's Debbie Bailey. I lead the Derbyshire Badger Vaccination Project, which has been running for 7 years. I'm a committee member of the High Peak Badger Group, and I'm also a trustee of the Badger Trust, and my expertise is badger vaccination and rehabilitation of badgers.
Who would like to go next? Shall we just go along from one to the next? Thank you, Debbie.
Graham, do you want to go?
Yeah, okay. That's better, it's on to me now. Yeah, I'm Graham Shepherd. I'm chair of South Yorkshire Badger Group. We've been set up since about 1985. Set up by coal miners, actually, in the Doncaster, Barnsley area. It's a bit of a myth that miners are badger baiters. They're actually founders of our group. We do the usual stuff, 24-hour helpline. We do the galas and talks and fundraising. We've got a website, a Facebook, and we do a bit of campaign. That's my job, is campaigning side of things. I'm the political wing of the Badger Group. We respond to set blocking, damage and point and snares and the likes, and we do set protections, which is one of the most significant things that we do, and that's what I'll be speaking about as the night goes on.
Thank you.
Thanks, Graham.
Thank you, Graham.
Dom, do you want to go?
Yeah, thank you. My name's Dominic Dyer. I'm Chief Executive of the Badger Trust. I'm also Policy Advisor and Wildlife Advocate for the Born Free Foundation. I sit on the board of Wildlife Countryside Link, which brings a lot of the big wildlife NGOs together with the smaller organisations like the Badger Trust. And I also sit on the board of the Royal College of Veterinary Surgeons Veterinary Nurses Council as well. So my sort of expertise is quite broad in animal welfare and wildlife protection. And before that, my background's really in food industry, plant science industry and government. So I've gone from sort of government, agriculture and food into conservation as my career has progressed. Obviously, I'm very much involved in the debate about protection of badgers, particularly when it comes to the political issues around this species. And there's never a more political animal, I'm afraid, than the badger. As much as it has legal protection, it's probably one of the most persecuted animals in Britain. And I'm busy constantly trying to defend this animal against vicious attacks, I would say, from certain individuals and interest groups that want to demonize it and want to see this animal quite effectively removed from large parts of the countryside. I feel very passionate about badgers, but I also feel very passionate about all of wildlife in Britain today, and the fact that we are at a crucial point, I think, in terms of destruction of our habitats and loss of our species. And I see the badger very much as a canary in the coal mine, because if we don't protect the badger against the problems associated with industrial farming that we see today, we're not just going to lose this amazing species from parts of the countryside where it's existed since the Ice Age. I think it's the tip of a very big iceberg, effectively, where we're going to lose far more species. So we've got to fight for the badger, because we've got to fight for the future of our British countryside and our landscapes as well.
Thanks, Dom. Craig?
Hello, good evening to everybody. It's a pleasure to be invited to another one. Certainly look forward to these. For those of you who don't know me, Craig Fellows, I'm a former Warwickshire police officer. I dealt with my first case back in 1984 in relation to badgers, and deliver police training, so the Pacific police courses on badgers, but also a whole array of wildlife crime. Work for the Badger Trust as a part-time capacity as a wildlife crime officer and trainer, advising obviously the Badger Trust, but groups, police forces, an awful lot of requests from police forces for advice, and sometimes these are very much from forces you probably wouldn't expect necessarily the issues. And it's good to see that some of the forces, and Greater Manchester Police only contacted me today with issues that they have. Which is always good to see. So training does have an effect. But certainly wildlife crime, looking at the reports that come into the trust, assessing them, are the police force doing the right job? Are they doing anything about it? What can we do to support them? And obviously support any groups with any questions they have.
Fabulous. Siobhan, it's over to you again.
Over to me again. Okay, so we're going to have a discussion with our experts and a question and answer with regard to how we can best protect and defend our badgers. Our panelists will all share their ideas, and hopefully everybody will leave here more knowledgeable than they were when they arrived.
I don't doubt for a minute I will.
East Yorkshire Badgers, fortunately, our Badger Protection Group, fortunately we do not have the cull here, nor do we have the HS2, which is causing devastation in other parts of the country. But we do have other types of crime. We have our local wildlife officers have told me that their biggest problem at the moment is nighttime stalking and hair coursing. That's the other one, and badger crime. Now the badger crime Very often the badger criminals are cross-border criminals who are coming into our area from somewhere else. We have had a couple of instances of our own, but badger baiters are not a very common thing in our area. We do have ongoing problem with hunts and shoot estates. It was perfectly acceptable for hunts up until 2004 to block badger sets on hunt days to prevent foxes from going down and taking refuge. But that in 2004 changed, and now it is absolutely unlawful to touch a badger set or a badger. It is also totally unlawful to set a snare on a badger's track, and that is something which some unsavoury types of people will do because it's an easy way of catching and getting rid of badgers. Our wildlife officers are excellent here in North Yorkshire, I would say, and they take badger crime very, very seriously. And our Scarborough local wildlife officer is registered with Natural England to deal with sets and badgers. Nobody is allowed to touch a badger set nor a badger. They are a protected species. We feel very strongly that ordinary people can do an enormous amount for the protection of our wildlife. You don't have to be a specialist. Very ordinary people can just remain alert, and it's a very wise thing to join a local badger group or Badger Trust. And if you don't want to join initially, Badger Trust is available online at the touch of a button or a mouse, pretty much 24/7, and it is a mighty resource of extremely valuable scientific and factual information on everything from what to feed badgers, if you have badgers in your locality that need feeding in the drought, for example, to being able to point you in the right direction of your local badger group. So I think that's probably enough from me, and we will get on with the science and the other aspects of what we're going to talk about tonight, and we'll hand over to our experts. So,
Excellent.
Dom, like to, or who would like to start now, perhaps?
I think we'd organised Dom to sort of set the national landscape with regard to the cull and the political issues at the minute, if that's okay, Dom.
Yeah, by all means. And thank you so much, Siobhan, and thank you everyone who's helped put this together. These events are really, really important, not least at this time when we can't meet physically. I think it's wonderful that we can use Zoom and other platforms to come together in this way. Yeah, just to say a few words really to set the scene for where we are. We've heard a lot in recent weeks about, you know, how British wildlife and how our environment has suffered so much. And a starting point that you see for a lot of that discussion is 1970, the year I was born, interestingly enough. So I turned 50 this summer, and it does make me think about what's gone on in that period of time, because, you know, we have lost on average over 60% of the number of species, wild species in this country. We've lost a huge amount of our habitats, you know, a huge number of animals and creatures that we took for granted. You know, from skylarks to nightingales to newts to hedgehogs are no longer anything like in the numbers when I was a young child that we would see those creatures. And, you know, it's a fundamental concern for all of us about what the future holds. But I think also because we've been through such an extraordinary period of history in the last 6 months, and this is something that we're very much focusing on for the upcoming Badger Trust webinar, symposium, sorry, on the 14th of November, is how lockdown and how our closing world, because of this pandemic we're all facing, has made us think a lot much more about the natural world around us. And there's no question now, I think, that there's a heightened concern about what's happening to this beautiful world that we inhabit, not least in our own backyard. And we've definitely seen that in recent months, I would say, in relation to lots more people getting involved and concerned about the future of the badger. You know, I've campaigned on the badger cull issue, as many of people on this Zoom call, for many, many years. And I've seen people come and go and organisations come and go in terms of raising concerns on what's gone on. But what I have been very pleased to see over the last few months is that so many new people, young people in particular, but across society, are getting more involved and more concerned about what's happening. And I think we realise we cannot afford to take wildlife or our beautiful natural habitats for granted. It might be farming, it might be industrial use of pesticides, it might be building development, wildlife crime, death on the roads, big civil engineering projects like HS2. The problems are endless, but the threats are continuous. Now, the badger is one of those species that really sums up the problem that we have. You know, as Graham was saying early on about the origins of this badger protection group, many go back to the 1960s and 70s when individuals got very angry about badger baiting and decided to literally sit on sets to protect badgers from baiters who are coming to dig them out and put dogs down to fight with badgers. That led to the first private members bill in Parliament in 1973 where the badger got protection, and then you had the Wildlife Countryside Act and the Badger Protection Act, and you enhance the protection of badgers and their habitats to a degree that on legislation terms, the badger is one of the most protected species in the country today, but equally it also is one of the most persecuted. And this sort of brings us, I think, to the other big debate that we're seeing a lot of discussion about because of the impending departure of Britain from the European single market and the end of the Brexit process, is what the future of farming and agriculture will be like in Britain as well. And there's been a lot of discussion about the agriculture bill, lots of concerns being raised about the National Farmers Union, that there's going to be a terrible future for British farming and we're going to have chlorinated chicken and hormone injected meats. And I think they're all valid debates, but I also think they're a bit of a smokescreen, to be quite frank, from a farming industry that, despite what American imports might bring, is actually not very good at all at home. And the standards of farming and the standards of animal welfare have, in my view, deteriorated to a large degree as the farming industry has become much more industrialized. And this sort of, came up at Bird Fair when I chaired a debate this year about, the future of our natural environment with some very well-known figures like, Jane Goodall and Chris Packham, Liz Bonin, Craig Bennett from the Wildlife Trust, but also, the former chief scientist at DEFRA, Ian Boyd. And one of the points that Ian Boyd made that I thought was very relevant to the debate was when I asked him, I said, if you were still chief scientist at DEFRA, would you have signed off those 11 new cull licenses this year that we know is causing such a dramatic destruction of this beautiful animal across the country at this present time? And he said to me, well, I still believe that there's a role for badger culling in terms of reducing bovine TB, but he says, I think the fundamental problem is we just have too many cattle on our farms in Britain. And if we reduce the numbers of cattle, which we need to do because we need to tackle climate change, which is an impending emergency despite this pandemic we're currently going through, we need to look at how we remove certain amounts of dairy and meat from our diets so that we can move more to a plant-based diet, which is healthier for the nation, but also for the planet as a whole. And if we reduce the number of cattle on farms and we then rewild some of that land, we will bring back a lot of the nature that we lost over the last 50 years and also create carbon sinks to start dealing with the problems, that we've seen in terms of emissions. So that's a virtuous circle. But he also said if you reduce the number of cattle, you also reduce the disease in cattle, and that reduces the need to kill badgers as a consequence. And that's really the fundamental problem that we have. We have millions of cows in this country moved around in intensive farming systems, with many farmers hanging on for grim death, to be quite frank, in a declining industry where they get very poor return for the meat and dairy they produce. Many young people who are growing up on farms probably think at the moment the last thing they want to be is a farmer inheriting the family business. They'd rather go off and do something else. And I think we need a sea change because we can't keep fighting this battle day in, day out for an industry that's in decline. I think the greatest tragedy we could face is that we could see badgers wiped out from parts of the country where they've lived since the Ice Age for an industry that is declining and dying on its feet anyway. And those farms might well be gone in 10 years, but the badgers will be gone as well and they won't come back. So what we need is a sea change. And I think this pandemic is an opportunity for all of us to step back and think a bit about how important that natural world is outside our doorstep and how we need to protect it, that we can't go on doing what we've done in the past. We have to change the way we travel, the way we work, the way we eat, the way we think about everything in our day-to-day lives to deal with this massive climate emergency that is inherently going to be that huge tsunami that's going to wash over us even if we do get out of this pandemic in the next few years. And think about the consequences of why we got in this pandemic, because we basically have traded wild animals, exploited the wild environment to such a degree that we've created zoonotic diseases that cross over to humans, which cause us massive, massive problems. And there's no easy end to this problem that we're in now. So the point I want to make is that the badger is, in some ways, seems a small issue about the future of our countryside, but it actually is part of a much, much bigger picture And when you ask me why it is and what we can do to protect it, I think we need to think more broadly. We need to all think about what the badger means to us as an animal, but also what it means to the future of the countryside and the future of our farming and agriculture systems, and what we're willing to do to change it. I'd like to see in the next decade a significant shift away from intensive livestock and dairy farming. I'd like to see more people, taking on a plant-based diet. I'd like to see the farming industry and the government promoting opportunities for farmers to do something different. I'd like to see then a transition away from the need to be killing any wildlife to protect intensive livestock farms, not least badgers. And I hope we might see in the next 20 to 30 years a resurgence in the beautiful wild Britain that we've lost so much of, and a return of badgers and other species that are under continuous threat, and a recognition maybe by a new generation not to make the mistakes of the past. And we can all make a difference. That's by joining our badger groups, by supporting the Badger Trust, by speaking up for having a better way of protecting our environment, and not just sitting back and just saying that we can't change things. We can change things, and we have to change things. So
Dom, can I just butt in actually, because you're kind of segueing into a couple of questions that we've received. So people have asked a couple of quite detailed questions about the cull. So how long they're going on for, what's the time scale for this round? You mentioned licenses that have been given out. So how many years are they for? Is there anything that the public can do, sort of writing to their MPs, or anything about those licenses that have been issued now? And what can they do to stop any more being issued in the future, if you think that's what's likely in the political landscape at the minute?
Well, a quick snapshot of where we are. We now currently have 11 new licenses in operation at the moment. We have culling in over 11 counties of England, from Cornwall in the southwest all the way to Cumbria in the north. We have 103,000 badgers that were killed up to the end of 2019. We expect we probably will see another 65,000 killed by the end of this year, which could take it up to nearly 170,000 dead badgers. We have no good evidence to prove that badger culling is working. The cost is probably around £70 million by the end of this year. The vast majority of badgers will be killed by controlled shooting, which there's no proper monitoring, and many badgers could take up to 5 minutes to die of blood loss and organ failure. Is there an easy way out of this? No, there is not, because the government has thrown all science out of the window to a large degree. This is a politically driven policy to really prop up a farming industry which is going through great pain, as I said, because of the Brexit process that is now playing out. So I think there's a very difficult scenario we're in. I think people can do certain things. They should write to their MPs, and many are. They should definitely support the Badger Trust and their local badger groups, because we need your support like never before. They need to support the work of Debbie Bailey and the Wildlife Trust and Badger Vaccination groups across the country, because badger vaccination is not only a viable intervention method to lower TB in badgers, it's far more cost effective and it's humane, and it brings farmers, landowners and wildlife conservationists together like never before. And I'd say another thing that we should continue to do, because of the huge numbers of young people that are out of work and the numbers that need to try and find a good future in this very difficult time, we are pushing for a nature national service to the government, that they will put millions and millions of pounds into an apprenticeship scheme to get people into green jobs in the countryside. A key element of that could be to support badger vaccination projects, which in turn would massively increase the level of capability of organisations and groups that people like Debbie are working in. So we need more money, more communication of the value of badger vaccination, and more people to carry it out. And I think the government can do that. There is definitely an opportunity to harness that youth unemployment problem as well.
And is there any available information about that at the minute that we can share with everyone, or is it just at idea stage?
No, the Nature National Service has been promoted by the Wildlife Trusts, by the RSPB, the RSPBA. If you have a look, you can find information on it. It's a project that Wildlife Countryside Link, that I sit on the board, has been promoting. We've had correspondence recently with the Chancellor and the Prime Minister. There is a lot of interest in doing this, but what we've got to do is make these discussions into reality. But we have a massive problem of youth unemployment, but we think that's really important as well.
Okay, so we'll be able to find that link for all of the attendees and share it with you.
Yes.
As hopefully as we're going on, I'll have a quick look now.
Thank you.
Debbie, that segues lovely into Debbie and her vaccination programme, if that's okay, Debbie?
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. Just to answer Emma's question about how long the cull's possibly going to continue for, I'm possibly right in saying, Dominic, we've probably got about another week, a week and a half.
Yeah, a few more weeks of this 6-week culling process, and then supplementary licenses could run to the end of the year, where badgers could still be trapped and shot, as you know. So yes, that's it at the moment.
Yeah, so leading on from what Dominic said, I'd first of all like to say and make it really clear, as I'm going to say it till I'm blue in the face, bovine TB is a cattle disease, and 96% of transmission is from cattle to cattle, and badgers only play a very small part in it. And I'm sure when Ian is available and he joins us, he'll give you a bit more in-depth information on that. So the idea of badger vaccination and why I promote it the way we do in Derbyshire is, at this moment in time, I think that under the circumstances that we're in, those badgers that are vaccinated are going to be the only badgers we see in the future, certainly with this government and the way it's proceeding. That's not the reason why we do it, obviously. The reason why we do it is because we have to find something and an alternative solution, because farmers and landowners don't want to do nothing. They want to either cull or they want to vaccinate, and we've got to make sure that we promote badger vaccination and change that climate with landowners and farmers. Thankfully, in Derbyshire, that's what we are still doing. Only this week, I've had another 6 landowners come on board for badger vaccination, and they're beef farmers. So the tide is changing. It might be slow, but it is. We've got 60 people on the books as it stands at the moment, and we'll be going out in November to survey those new 6 farms to get them on board and get them on the licence as soon as possible. So people are looking at it now in a bit of a more positive light. I think climate-wise for us, even though culling has come to Derbyshire, unfortunately, even though we stopped it last year with massive help from Dominic and the Badger Trust and Tim Birch from the Wildlife Trust. Dominic and Tim worked really, really hard with campaigning and lobbying down in London with the government, and we did manage to get it stopped. However, the NFU are relentless, as we know. So I think what we've got to try and do in these new areas is to try and stop it expanding even more. And the way we can do that is via our vaccination programmes. We've had massive support off the public in Derbyshire. We've been inundated with volunteers, and the really good bit about it is like Dominic said, there are lots of young people coming forward, and I think that is because of, like Dominic says, the climate is changing, that these young people want to look after their wildlife and this planet, and so they're coming out of the woodwork now, which is fabulous. We've got a really brilliant young vaccinator, Georgie Hutton, who we managed to get on the course on the last minute, and she's like our advocate for our group. She's only 26 years of age. She's absolutely fabulous. So at every opportunity, we've got this young girl shouting about badger vaccination to get the younger community involved and get the the youngsters really shouting for it for us.
Do you know what, that's so important. As soon as I announced to a few friends that I was a new trustee of the Badger Trust, one of my friend's daughters actually, and she's only 8, turned around and said, but badgers kill cattle, badgers kill the cows. And I was absolutely staggered at the response, because I'd never heard that from a child before. Obviously, I know about the culls and the propaganda surrounding them, but I had never actually heard a child so automatically have that response.
Could I come in here and ask Debbie to perhaps explain to the audience a little bit about the cattle testing, because people are not really understanding very well and very clearly.
Well, we all know how,
it's a cattle-to-cattle disease, and the badgers are just the poor creatures, along with deer and rats and other creatures who pick it up from the cattle. But the fact that there are some hidden cattle in the herd because the test is not accurate, that's one point. And there was something else I wanted to ask you to say about the vaccination program. It's fantastic that you're working with other groups, Wildlife Trust and National Trust. It's that is really the way forward, collaboratively working. So will you explain a little bit to people about the fact that it's in the cattle, but it's not known to be in the cattle because the test is not accurate?
I can answer a little bit, but I think...
oh, you want to leave that for Ian?
I think Ian would be the best man because he can elaborate on it much better than I can. I mean, I do know quite a lot about it, and that's part of my role to know about it, you know, with working with farmers. We all know the test is absolutely flawed. You know,
just like magic, Ian's just arrived.
Sorry, just butting in. Ian is about to join us. I've just pushed him through. Here we are. He's on screen now. So Ian, you're currently muted, but welcome. And I'll let you join in the panel. This is the voice of the Badger Trust tech person behind the scenes. So well.
And that's perfect timing, Ian, because we'd just been asked a question about the accuracy of tests. So if you could just pick that up, and then Debbie, you can't go away because we've also got a question of how not to alienate farmers.
Yes, that's a very important question, and may I give Debbie another one in case it gets forgotten. And that is, Debbie, you run a training programme. There may be people in West Yorkshire, we don't have a cull, etc. over here, but there may be, I believe there is interest in West Yorkshire in badger vaccination. The public would like to know, I'm sure, about the training programme that you run.
Do you want me to answer that first, and then Ian can come in?
Absolutely, if that's okay. And also the bit about alienating farmers, and then we can have the big science bit from Ian, if that's all right with you, with everyone. Brilliant.
I think the question about alienating farmers, we certainly want to be working, you know, side by side with our farmers. We don't want it's them and us. That climate has to change massively. So, you know, Badger Vaccination does do that. We work really closely with all our 66 landowners now, and we communicate as best as possible. We don't talk about culling. We talk about badger vaccination. So even if those farmers are sitting on the fence, or there might be National Trust farmers who, because National Trust policy is not to cull badgers, they don't really at this moment in time have a choice. So for instance, in Edale, where we have 29 square kilometres, those National Trust farmers, most of that land there is owned by the National Trust, are on board with our project. So we don't sit around the table discussing culling. We just keep it to badger vaccination, and we keep promoting it, and we keep giving the evidence for it, and we keep giving the science for it. So I think that's the important bit. If you get into a conversation with people about culling, then you've got that possibility of them. They seem to think that we don't get it, and we're just there because we're, you know, tree huggers and woolly hatted people who love badgers, and you know, there's a lot more to it than that. So I think that's a really important thing to do. So the other question was about starting up badger vaccination. There's some really good research and evidence, and that's all been put together by Andy Robertson, who's one of the scientists from Exeter University. He does a little bit for the APHA. He also works, he's the National Trust TB advisory for the National Trust, so we work really closely with Andy Robertson. We've helped him put a package together with Cheshire Badger Vaccination Project. That's available. I can make that available to people for any groups that I'll put my email address on the chat, and then people can contact us if they'd like. It's got the whole packaging of how to start up and where to go, and you know, where there's money available. The Badger Trust have got the Claire Hammond Fund, so people can get money towards cages and fridges and the such like, so you can have a little bit of a starter kit. We put that together, me and Dominic, about 4 years ago maybe, so that's available for people to get them going, but we can certainly put them in the right direction for where all that information is.
And the training for the...
So the training, yeah. So in-house training for Derbyshire, because we've been running 7 years now, all our volunteers, we've got over 100 now, it's fabulous. People are coming, like I say, out of the woodwork, especially when there's culling involved. So we give all our volunteers in-house training. So we teach all of our volunteers all the aspects of badger vaccination. We also invite other groups to come. So Calderdale and Todmorden Group, Cheshire Group, Nottinghamshire, Staffordshire, they've all sent people to us for a bit of training. It's free, you can just join in with us. So if anybody wants to join that next year, we'll get that available. And we also host the APHA. So the APHA run the training courses. So if you want to be a lay vaccinator or learn how to set traps to vaccinate badgers, which has to be done under licence, you go to the APHA, and the APHA come to us in Derbyshire. We pre-bait all the badgers. So basically we do all the work, all the groundwork. We pre-bait the badgers, we put the traps in, and then when we come to set the traps, we hand over to the APHA. And I work around the Edale Valley with them. So I'll go out with them on the mornings that people are training. So you'll train and you'll catch our badgers and learn how to vaccinate a badger out in the field. And we've been doing that now for 3 years with the APHA. So, you know, they're always willing to come back and obviously use our badgers. And so, yeah, we work really closely with DEFRA and the APHA on those.
APHA, will you explain to people who APHA are, please?
Yeah, so APHA are the Animal, Plant and Health Authority, and they're sort of the old FERA. So they are a government body, but they do all the research at Woodchester Park on collared badgers. So all the research for TB, badger vaccination, is all done by that body.
And the other question I was going to ask you, these trips out in the morning, is this like 4 o'clock in the morning, 5 o'clock in the morning?
No, unfortunately, Siobhan, it's earlier than that. So our licence opens on the 30th of April till the 1st of December. And that's the season for badger vaccination. So in May and June and part of July, you're looking at first light. So the criteria for the licenses that all vaccinated badgers have to be vaccinated and released out of the traps within 3 hours of first light. So in end of April, May, June, you're looking at 3 o'clock, 3:30 in the morning.
I've got a dog that wakes up at that time anyway.
So we're all up at 2 o'clock in the morning, and we're on site for 3 o'clock when the light's just coming in. And then obviously as the season goes along, we finished trapping last week. We don't trap badgers in November. It's really difficult to trap badgers at the end of October, November. One, because of the weather. We can't trap badgers if there's a low temperature, wind and rain together, because of the welfare of the animal in the trap. So we have to carry on pre-baiting those badgers until we've got a window of opportunity. And we vaccinate 2 consecutive mornings wherever possible. So we'll set traps and vaccinate. We'll vaccinate the badger. We'll clip it and stock mark it and release it. And then we'll set the traps again in the afternoon. We'll get up again the following morning. And any badgers that are trapped with the stop mark on and the clip, we know we've done the night before, so they get released, and any new ones get vaccinated.
Fantastic. You're doing a great job.
One little tiny question, pre-baiting. Is that where you put out bait on a few days in a row to trick them, and then they eventually take the bait, so to speak, and go into the trap, and then you've got them?
Yeah, so it takes from start to finish about 10 to 12 days to actually train the badgers around the badger set with cameras up. So on day one, we'll put the trail cameras up that you use in the night time. We'll pre-bait around the badger set. So we make little divots in the hole, fill it up with bird peanuts, and put around about a 3-4 kilogram stone on top, so that only the badger can move it. so you don't get foxes moving it and you know, rats, mice, squirrels, things like that. We do that for about 4 days. Once we're happy with the bait going, traps go in. Traps are wired up so that the doors can't go down for about 7 days, and then we teach the badgers to go from the bait point, and we move the bait points into the trap. And then once we're happy that the badgers are going in, we can see all that on camera, we set the traps live, and we go for the 2 consecutive mornings.
So ladies, as I was nominated to be the horrible bad cop, we kind of need to move things on. Apologies, Craig, you were a cop. We kind of need to move things on a little bit, but I've just got a couple of questions that are relevant at this point, actually. So we've got John, who's asked about the public's perception of badgers, and if the pro-cull anti-badger publicity has been successful. Debbie, I don't know if you want to take that first, given you've said you've seen this surge of younger people getting involved and you've got a lot of volunteers. And then we've got someone else, Lucy, who's asked about if there's a list of landowners anywhere that are vaccinating or aren't vaccinating, you know, those ones that are pro-cull or not. And there was another question, Dawn, help me. So we've got someone else who's asked about why the vaccination programme is so controversial.
Oh, right. Well, the first bit, so culling. I think the more that culling's extended, the more the public, you know, are up in arms about it. So, yeah, we get, like I say, inundated with volunteers and from the public, general public, that come forward to either to help with the vaccination programme or to help with the cull teams that go out patrolling, you know, and trying to stop shooting and stuff going on lawfully, obviously. I know certainly for Derbyshire, our Derbyshire Against the Cull team have actually said that because of our Badger Vaccination Project, they have had more public support because they're more outraged about the fact that this government are culling in an area that could be used for research, and where we gather all the, you know, brilliant stuff that we do on the ecology of badgers around badger vaccination. Derbyshire County, they've had more support off the public towards helping these patrol teams than any other county. And that's because of the vaccination project, and we've been so openly, you know, publicising it and been vocal about it since we started it. What was the second question? Sorry.
I can't remember. I will find it and I'll come back to it. I'm kind of being pushed to get Ian to talk about the science now, if that's okay, Ian, because we're conscious of your time. And that'll give me a moment to find the other questions and come back to Debbie afterwards. Oh, Dom.
Okay, so the first thing people asked was about the skin test. So the standard skin test which is used is SICKET, which is the single intradermal comparative cervical tuberculin test. Basically what that means is you put 2 different tuberculins in, one from cattle, one from an avian source, and you compare the size of them. So basically it's a skin lump test. It was developed in 1908. And the reason, so shockingly, it only finds 50% of infected animals. So its sensitivity is 50%, which means that it leaves half the infected animals still left in the herd. It does have a very good specificity. The specificity means it's not picking up animals that aren't actually infected. So farmers like that, obviously, because they don't want to kill cattle that haven't got the disease. But its sensitivity is so low that it's missing a lot of infection. So when the vet comes and tests your herd of animals and finds some reactors, they might only find 2 reactors in the herd. Those are taken out and they're killed, and then there's 2 left in the herd, and you'll get a certificate from the government or a virtual one saying you're officially TB free. And unfortunately, there's still 2 infected animals in the herd, which then can develop the infection and spread it to other animals in the herd. But what's even worse, they can spread it around the country. So they're undetected infected cattle. So this is a real problem, because this means that in carry on.
No, it's okay. I'll butt in a little bit later. Don't worry.
So, I mean, this really low sensitivity was only, it came to our attention in 2018. There was 2 big government papers. This is actually from the British government, showing that this sensitivity was 50%. We believed before that it may be somewhere, 80%, something like that, which isn't fantastic, but it's a lot better. So when it drops to half, you realize that there's a massive reservoir of undetected infection, particularly in the high risk area in the west and southwest. So the worst thing is, so that's bad for farmers, because they go through all this testing and all this heartache of having their animals killed, and they're still infected animals. So 6 months or a year later, they have to go through it again. And if you look at the high risk area, maybe 50 to 60% of outbreaks of TB, or what's called breakdowns, are in herds that had it within the last couple of years. So they're never really clearing it from these herds. And then they use the same test that doesn't work as a pre-movement test. So then cattle can be tested, ones are left behind that are still infected, and they can move to anywhere in the UK. There's no other movement control except this test. And then when they get there, they get a post-movement test, which again uses the same test. So it's like a sieve. So it's letting disease spread all over the UK. So that's what happened in Cumbria. They had a very similar protocol for animals coming from Northern Ireland into the UK. They brought in this strain or spoliga type of TB, which is 17Z, which caused that it was very, seemed to be highly virulent. It affected a lot of cattle herds. And so they massacred all the badgers. So it shows how dangerous, this test, and I don't think the veterinary profession really has got their head around this. And I'm sure that farmers haven't got their head around it, because they're being lied to when they get their officially TB-free certificate. So they're not aware they've got.
Can I ask a really stupid question? So why has no one developed a more accurate test?
Well, they have developed a more accurate test. So there's a test called Gamma, which that is also so the skin test looking at immune reaction. Gamma test is also looking at an immune reaction, but in a more sophisticated way in the laboratory. It is much more sensitive. It's probably about 90% sensitive around there. A little bit less, a little bit more, depending on which study you look at. Its specificity is less. So that might be also around 90%, which means if you find 10 infected animals, one of them didn't actually have the disease. So, but the government are using Gamma, particularly in the edge area and to some extent in the high risk area for TB. So, that's good, except they're having to kill an awful lot of cows they're having to kill the ones they were picking up with the skin test, and then about the same equal number with the Gamma test, because it's picking up the rest.
Which brings us back to money and economics, I suppose.
It's economics, yeah. So then there's another test.
Wants to pick up on in a little bit.
Yeah, so then there's another test called APHA, which is a far more sophisticated test than all of the others put together, which uses a little virus called a phage that will only infect live live TB bacteria. It punctures them, and then the rest of the test amplifies a segment of DNA. So it's very specific. It's only live M. bovis. Only if you use it in a particular way, it's only M. bovis it will find and puncture. It's only M. bovis that it will amplify, so you can detect the DNA. So it's very sensitive and very specific. So, for example, you could replace all this skin testing by using actiphage on the bulk tank, or getting a milk sample. It's very sensitive, and use that to screen the whole herd, and you get you'd find out, is that herd actually infected or not, with be much more accurate. So there's barriers. The international trade is controlled by the OIE, and the World Trade Organization has rules as well, and they don't permit the use of that test. So it's to do with being able to maintain milk trade and being able to train meat trade. So that's why they're not using more sensitive tests. But the way they're doing it at the moment is a disaster, because it's ensuring that TB is spreading all over the UK. which, you know, I mean, we're spending 100 million a year on this disease, of which 7 million is killing badgers. And you know, that's shocking. And this is a disease that doesn't kill many people anymore. It used to kill tens of thousands at the start of the century, but now with pasteurization, it doesn't, you know, it used to be in the milk, and now hardly anyone. I think there was 18 cases, no, 25 cases in 2018, the last data I've looked at. So it's not a massive problem. So spending all this money ineffectively controlling it. And you know, this policy hasn't got a hope of ever getting rid of TB the way they're doing it. And also they're not looking at the causes, which are the way we're treating dairy cows, really. The big industrial dairy it's always going to have TB, and they're never going to get rid of it. So, you know, it needs a change in mindset. We need to stop killing the cows. We need to start treating the cows. We need to start finding out why these cows are getting TB. And we definitely need to stop killing badgers.
Ian, may I ask you, please? Farmers have to have farmers are obliged to have their cattle tested. Could you please explain to me, is that once a year? And then you mentioned pre-movement and post-movement testing. So if you're going to sell some cattle to Scotland or Durham, then you would have to. So would you please explain to the audience about, and then who pays for this testing? So when do farmers have to have a test once a year, or do they have to have it every time they sell cattle, or how does it work?
Okay, so it depends where they are in the country. So some parts of the country are on much, you know, are on, you know, on 2 or 4 year testing. Some parts of the country, like the edge area, have been moved to 6 monthly testing, because they want to really try and get hold of that. So it really depends where you are, how often you're doing the testing.
This is DEFRA, is it? Is it DEFRA?
This is by APHA DEFRA, yeah. Okay. And you're paying for it. We're all paying for the testing. It's public money.
The farmers don't pay for it. They just lose money when they have to sell their cattle.
Yeah, I mean, if you're a small farm, it's an absolute disaster to get TB. You know, your livelihood, everything, your income, your cows, it's an absolute disaster for them. And the policy is not fit for purpose. It's not, you know, this is a policy. Test and slaughter was a policy that was developed in the Crimean War. You know, it's called stamping out, where you just kill all the animals that have got the disease, and we really ought to be moving on to something a bit more sophisticated than that.
Thankfully, we're not looking at that for COVID.
Well, can you imagine if
it's exactly the parallel, isn't it?
Well, it is, but can you imagine using a test that works 50% of the time for COVID? That people would be outraged, wouldn't they? You wouldn't be able to control it with that kind of testing.
Can I just ask, is sort of the Badger Cull a cross-party initiative? Are all the parties behind it, or are the...
No, not at all. So the Labour Party are very much opposed to it. The Green Party are very much opposed to it. The Lib Dems they've kind of flip-flop a bit on the issue. So it's hard to get a clear steer. I think they're moving away from supporting it. They didn't really give us a very clear indication of whether they did or not support it before the last election. Yeah, but no, it's definitely a conservative policy.
It's fair to say, though, that that the policy of killing badgers goes back over a number of decades, and all governments have got a lot of blame at their door. That they've all played with this policy. We were culling badgers in the 1970s when Howard Wilson and Jim Callaghan were in power. We were culling badgers under the randomised badger culling trial when Labour were in office under Tony Blair and Gordon Brown. 11,000 badgers died there, and £50 million was spent. And there was significant push from agriculture ministers like Nick Brown in Tony Blair's government to cull badgers. So there were people in the Labour Party that have done that. It's fair to say under the 5 years of Jeremy Corbyn, there was talk, but no action really to bring about a fundamental change. I think it's got better under Keir Starmer, because I think as an opposition, they're getting more focused. I think, we have Luke Pollard, we have Angela Rayner as deputy leader. I think there's a real genuine concern and interest in animal welfare issues, and they are engaging with us in a way that we haven't seen in a number of years. That's good to see. Ian's right. I think the Liberals are beginning to move. In the coalition, they supported culling. And if they didn't sign up to it in that coalition agreement, it wouldn't have happened. So Nick Clegg and senior people around him have a lot to answer for there as well. Caroline Lucas, Ian's local MP, has been very good. The Greens have been very good, but they don't have huge influence, of course. They've got strong individual voices like Caroline. I think the problem you have politically, as we said earlier, and Ian's mentioned this as well, you've got to change the cattle industry. Unless you change the cattle industry and the way we produce food in this country, if we continue to do it in an industrial intensive way, you know, killing and moving large numbers of cows, if you kill cows and kill badgers to kill cows, you're never going to get out of this. And I think that's the real issue. You have to change the farming industry and the way it operates to bring this cycle of disease, you know, to a stop. Otherwise, it's just going to keep going on and on and on. As Sue Bourne was saying earlier on, you know, this disease goes into industrial pollution into lots of different species, into rats, into foxes, into alpacas, into dogs, into cats.
Yeah.
You know, it spills over, so that, you know, it's a real problem,
And it's in the soil, isn't it?
It is in the soil, and we believe now, and the government are beginning to understand more about the dangers of that. It could be weeks, it could be months that TB bacteria is surviving in slurry, for example, that's being spread all over farms with no proper biosecurity controls whatsoever. And also, we don't have good evidence that badgers actually go close to cattle. We know through satellite collaring that they tend to avoid each other in the pasture areas and in farmland areas. And we have a speaker from Ireland who'll be joining us at our symposium alongside Debbie on the 14th of November that will talk about that. So you always have this view that there's a significant disease transmission route from badgers to cattle. I would say that all we really know is there's a significant disease transmission route from cattle into wildlife, and that's just badgers and other creatures as well.
So I'm very conscious that we need to move on again. So let's try and close this section on a high note. Debbie, we've had somebody ask how many badgers you vaccinate per year.
Debbie?
Thank you. I was just typing that out actually to answer. We expand every year. So, you know, we've gone from a small team of just me vaccinating and 14 volunteers in 2014, and we're just vaccinated 50 badgers on our reserves. We're now vaccinating between, depending on what the population is running at, because it varies every single year. So last year we vaccinated 221 badgers from the 1st of May till around about the 2nd week of October. So it's not an annual, it's a seasonal thing. This year at the moment, because of COVID-19, we didn't start till the middle of June because of the COVID restrictions. We've vaccinated, I think, around about 205 badgers, which is brilliant, but we haven't had access to all the farms this year because of COVID. We've got a few farms that were closed that we just couldn't get access to. So I think we're down probably around about 60, 70 badgers. So we would have been hitting the 300 mark. And we're nearly up to 1,000. We're not far off. If it hadn't been for COVID, you know, we would have done around about that figure. Which for a volunteer-led project, you know, is some going. And just to answer a little bit of one of the questions that was above, this project is 50% funded by DEFRA. So, you know, it's not about whether it's accepted or not. It is accepted. The research and the evidence is there from the APHA. It's just like what's going on with COVID now. As I've said on many other webinars, we've been batting on about herd immunity for the last 5 years and nobody's listened to us. And now because of COVID-19 and vaccination, and that's what they're looking for, and that's what suddenly it's in the mix, you know. Vaccine isn't 100% and it never will be. It isn't in humans. However, it works very well in badgers and it stops that cycle of spread, which is what we need. We need to stop the cattle infecting the wildlife with it, and we need to do something about the badgers not spreading it back. And vaccinating the badgers does that. And we get funded, like I say, from the government to run this project. It's part of their 25-year strategy. And I think that's why it's becoming a little bit more accepted now by the farming community, because, you know, as much as we don't like this government that are in, it is part of the strategy to try and stop things.
It's the environment in which you're having to do this, isn't it? Yep. Fabulous. Thank you for that. It's brilliant. Sorry, Ian.
Before we leave the science bit, could I just show people a couple of graphics that will just explain about the badger disease and cattle disease?
if our tech support can help us.
I think I can just share my screen. Possibly.
Yeah, you should be able to just share the screen.
Excellent.
Okay, so just before I do that, there's a point being made by Douglas. I didn't get on to the pre-movement testing. Not all depends where the animals are going. There are exceptions about pre-movement, so they don't all have to be pre-movement or post-movement tested when they're going. But the farmer pays for that. We pay for the routine testing, but the farmers pay for that. So anyway, so I'm going to try and get up a graphic. This didn't really go very well last time, but let's see if it works. Host disabled attendee screen sharing, apparently. So I can't share my screen.
Okay, sorry about that. Let me see if I can do anything about it. Keep talking. I'll do a quick check and come back to you.
Okay, so what I'm going to show you is the first graph, if I can ever show you it, is going to be a comparison between what's happening in the 3 different countries, England, Wales and Scotland, since 1996 up to the present day. So it's very instructive if you ever get to see it. The second one is to do with you are the host now. Okay, so apparently I should be able to show you.
Try that.
Yay.
Ah.
Oh, can you see my screen now?
Yeah, I can.
Okay, so I'm hoping you can see this. It won't open up for some reason, but anyway, there you go. So this graph here, this is a comparison of the incidence rate. That's the new breakdowns in herds over the last 20 odd years. So Scotland doesn't really have that much of a problem. England and Wales being pretty similar. This is where we started killing lots of animals to foot and mouth disease, the last great mass slaughter. And then they suspended all the pre-movement testing so they could restock animals all over the country. And there was this massive, great big hike. And that's carried on going up. So here we get to 2013. This is when England starts killing badgers. So in Wales, they have a slightly more progressive approach in terms of testing. And they didn't have the mass, they did kill a few badgers, but they didn't kill anything like didn't have mass badger killing. So you can see Wales has done, rather better. And here's England, it's gone on its same trajectory. There's always this cycle, but England is still going up or plateauing. It's not getting anywhere, whereas Wales, without killing badgers. So when you ask badger killers why that is, they just shut up. They don't want to talk about why Wales has done so much better without killing badgers. So that's the first graph. And the second graph, so it looks a bit more complicated. This is what's going on in the badger culling zones. So it's not as complicated as it looks. So if you look at the blue lines, this is what's happening in the Gloucester culling zone. So this is the disease, the percentage of herds that have TB in the culling zones. So the culling started here in Gloucestershire and in Somerset. Somerset's red, Gloucestershire's blue. You can see it was quite high and it was coming down anyway before they started culling. They start culling, and if you look at Gloucestershire, it kind of goes down a little bit, kind of plateaus, and then it goes up. So what's really, so it started here, and then this is where Dorset starts. They're claiming this as a success, but you can see quite clearly it's not. There's a government paper, which is here. This is where the government paper by Downes et al. Looked up, and they said, oh yeah, it's really working. It's going down in Somerset, and it's going down in Gloucestershire. But you can see in the following year in Gloucestershire, it just really spikes again. So this, after 5 years of culling, the government paper looked at 4 years, our paper looked at 5 years. After 5 years of culling, the prevalence is higher in Gloucestershire than it was before culling started. In Somerset, it's about the same. In Dorset, after 3 years of culling, again, it's higher now than it was before culling started. So that's been a disaster, really, for farmers. It's a disaster for taxpayers, disaster for cows, disaster for badgers, and it's a real disaster for farmers. In Gloucestershire, they've been culling now for 7 years. There's new results for the next year about to come out, and we know they're going to be disastrous as well. So I would really like to reach out to farmers, because there must have been lots of farmers out there who've been told you've got to kill badgers, you must kill badgers. That's all they've been offered. You know, the government can turn up and kill their cattle, and this is what they've been offered, and it's a disaster. So the only other point on here is there's two lines here. There's a solid line. That's the herds that have all been exposed to the whole thing, the whole time of culling. Underneath, there is what's called herds in existence. And that's herds that are around there, but they might have only been exposed to 2 or 3 years of culling, or they moved into the area after culling started. And you can see that those lines, those dotted lines, you know, they might have crossed at some point, but they're all lower in all 3 areas. The herds not exposed to the full culling are doing better than the herds all exposed to culling. So this is pretty damning evidence. It's enough to break the code and go, hang on, something's funny's going on. The more we cull, the worse it gets. What's happening? Anyway, that's the end of the science bit. I just thought I'd show you that. And I'll get out of my screen if I can.
Thank you, Ian. That's great. Guys, Craig and Graham, I wonder if we could move on to the artificial sets and some of the wildlife crime and explore how the audience that's listening could start looking out for badgers and people that might be misbehaving or hurting them, and how we get artificial sets and things to also rehome them.
Yeah.
Siobhan, did you want to jump in there? Did I miss something?
I was going to say, Graham does a lot of work also in set reinforcing, and it's absolutely fantastic, and thrills me to bits to think.
So could we perhaps start with that, Graham? Is that okay?
Yeah, sure, yeah. First of all, why do we need to do it? When you go out on your prowls around and you might find a set with a big hole dug in it. The hole might be well away from the entrances. It might be a fair distance behind, and it may not be a hole. It might have been refilled, but it will be clear that the vegetation's gone, so you know something's going on. And what's happened there is that some local person has been along with his terrier and his spade and his brain cell in the spade, and they dig out badgers. Why might they do it? Nobody can ever answer. People ask me, of all people, why do they do that? I just don't know why they do it, but it must be a different kind of person from the people I've experienced throughout my life in other ways. So we don't have a lot of, we don't have bovine TB in our area and major issues to think about. We've not got vaccination yet, but where we spend our time is trying to put right this problem that is quite widespread. And I think maybe Craig might back me up that we are one of the worst areas in the country for this, and it is. It has been fairly traditional over maybe hundreds of years. So what we've set about doing is protecting the badger sets. It's quite a big problem, really, to tackle on, but we've got the hang of it by now, and we're quite prolific, probably more so than any group. It's our kind of speciality, if you like.
It's your superpower.
That's because
people.
Graham,
that's right.
South Yorkshire and Doncaster is close to you, and that's a very bad area for set interference, badger baiting.
That's right. Why it should be clustered in that part of the world, I don't know, but the problem was probably began maybe a couple of 100 years or more ago, and it's just become a tradition. Every different parts of the country have their own ways of doing things. So what we do then is we protect badger sets. We've done the group's been established in 1985, and we've done 165 since then. And of our protected sets so far, 2 have been attacked by badger baiters successfully. 2 out of 165. So we think we're getting the hang of it, really. What we do in practice. Oh, we also, by the way, we have done artificial sets. We built 65 artificial sets in the same space of time. None very recently, because there don't seem to be the need anymore. We used to have more badgers for release, orphans that have been kept into autumn, and injured badgers that have been recuperated and put right. So we've done 62 artificials. All the rest have been, well, we've had 5 that were not taken up by badgers out of the 62, and that was just a waste of time, but you never know, because what we're trying to do is just increase the opportunities for badgers, a bit like people may put bird boxes up on their premises, just give nature a bit better chance. And we did it because there was a distinct lack of badgers remaining in Doncaster area. So yeah, we built the sets, 5 not taken up, so you've got what, 57 successful sets adopted by badgers.
So you're a badger property developer.
Yeah,
we've actually got a question about the materials that you use and any regulations and things that might be required.
Well, yeah, I'll move exactly onto that something right now. To start the ball rolling, we get a license from Natural England to protect sets. You don't need that for artificial sets. You've not interfered with anything, but for protecting sets, it is quite a serious disturbance, I'll be frank about it. So you get a license, and I really ought to mention my colleague Dave Swift, he takes on all the responsibility for all this, and he's done it for years and years with tremendous success. So you get a license, you need the landowner's permission written to fill the DEFRA form. Natural England actually never did see the difference. I don't think they do really either. And we used to do it. It was very expensive. We used to get concrete reinforcing mesh, which is extremely strong mesh. It's what holds buildings' foundations up with. And we've moved on more recent years to belting, old pit belting, industrial rubber belting from quarries, from waste handlers, and that kind of material. And we've got, once again, Dave Swift has made it his business to go around finding these places. We've got some very cooperative industrial establishments that put it on one side for us. But it all's got to be collected, it's got to be stored somewhere, we've got to get the tools, and then we've got to go and do the job. We have to book a digger, we have to JCB, something like that. We need a good team. Our team, we're getting older now. I think I'm still the oldest, but there's still plenty that are pushing up to 70 now. And we have a lot of good help, well, maybe 4 times or so per year, from the Sheffield conservation volunteers. And they love to come along, and they enjoy the work. They really see the point in it, and really get stuck in. They're very handy with the shovels and spades, and they're handy with the kettle and the tin of biscuits and everything. And we have a good enjoyable days out like that. And the harder the work is, the more satisfaction we get. So what do? If we've got a JCB, we take the top 12 inches of soil off. Big area, maybe 10 meters square, you know, bigger, what can I say, bigger than maybe 2 houses of sort of platform. And we level it, we lay the reinforcing mesh or the rubber belting, a couple of, well, maybe I would say 3 is a minimum of layers. Overlap the joints because they're all different shapes and sizes. They've all come from different sources. We then screw the whole thing together with the screws that can't be taken back out. They've got a sort of chamfer on the slot that where the screwdriver goes, so that you can turn it in, but you can't undo it. My dad used to call them prison screws, but I never. He never
that might not be PC these days.
He never told me how he knew that. And the whole thing's made secure that way. We then have to put all the soil back on again. We try and put the roots back on, the vegetation, and yeah, it's always autumn work. The licenses are always between July and December. And by spring or by next summer, you can't really see that we've been there. And yeah, as I said, it is very successful. We've had 1 or 2 attempts. I remember one where we found a broken bolt croppers. They've broken the bolt croppers trying to get.
I hope they were terribly expensive bolt croppers.
Well, I think they didn't really look. They looked a bit amateurish to me, I'll be honest. We have to use bolt croppers ourselves, and we've got some giant ones that you really have to pull and tug out. Maybe sometimes 2 men. Ours don't break.
Excellent.
Yeah, so there you end up with a scene that you know you have to try and remember where they are. We don't touch. Oh, we also beg and borrow plastic pipes, like underground drain pipes, 10 inches or so diameter. Places like Hepworth Ceramics might have plastic ones and pot ones, and we might have to use those if we go too low over a tunnel or something like that. Mm-hmm. So we scrounge them up as well. We try and you can't really disguise the entrance, but the badger diggers know where it is anyway. And just to go back a little bit, where they operate with the dogs, they turn up with a terrier with a tracer collar on it, which now that it's all illegal, it's still legal, I think, on ferrets, ferreting for rabbits. So it's a tracer collar, that an attachment on the dog's collar. They go over the land with an instrument and find out exactly where that is, because the dog's gone in, the badger has backed up to its chamber, and they confront each other, and they may fight underground, or they just hold each other off, and because of that they know where the dog is from above ground, and that's where they dig. The dog might have a horrendous fight underground
and be horribly injured itself.
Yeah, they might take the badger out and throw it to the dogs. There's all sorts of different things. They may, you know, they may even take the badgers away and fight them in a pit with betting going on. We don't really know a lot about that. But the dogs, there's no way the dog's ever going to go to a vet with an injury that is very obvious what they've been used for. You can tell just by by the breed of dog in some ways. Some of these guys go lamping and they have big running, they're bull lurcher, they're bulls crossed with like greyhound or something for running. And sometimes the terrier just enables them to get the badger out of set. And then they might throw the dog set the dog onto the badger above ground and have great fun watching what happens.
That's
So,
awful. Graham, I'm terribly sorry. I'm going to have to stop you there.
Yeah.
But if it's okay with you, we'll also share your details with the audience so that if they've got some stuff that would be of use to you, or if they've got some land that would be of use for a badger chaise, then that would be great. Craig, can we ask? Sorry,
I'll just quickly say. My East Yorkshire Badger Groups recently produced our newsletter. We haven't had one for some years, but we've got lots of pictures in there of Graham's work on the last set protection, and it shows you exactly what they use. So if anybody wants a copy of that, we can send it to them online.
We can probably add it into the email that we're going to send to the audience with all of the contact details and everything.
Exactly. So if you'd like a copy of the East Yorkshire Badgers newsletter, there are lots of photographs in there of the last set protection at Syke House, which is just
great.
Doncaster.
Yeah, we can definitely add it onto the email. Craig, please tell us what to spot, who we can report, what we can do without breaking the law ourselves to stop these horrible people.
Okay, what to spot? Certainly, Graham is correct in that there's certainly a peak area around South Yorkshire, Doncaster. Traditionally, that's been since the 80s. I've been aware, obviously, since then. It hasn't changed. What do you spot? I mean, the first thing I'm going to make people aware of, if you suspect badger diggers are operating in an area, then the first bit of advice is do not approach them. These people will not take too kindly to being told what they're doing is wrong. So keep your distance, safe distance, record anything you can see, any vehicles they may have arrived in. You know, obviously, if you can safely film it, then film it. But obviously, again, never put yourself at risk. If it's taking place, it's 999. Nobody should ever worry about bringing the police. It is an emergency. It's a criminal offence that's taking place, even if it turns out not to be. So it's maybe somebody who was actually legitimately on the land. And although it's not morally right digging foxes, foxes on land is allowed under certain conditions. Let the police decide that. It's up to them to decide. They will not criticise somebody for ringing 999. A lot of people are very worried about ringing 999 because they don't think it's an emergency. It's badgers being persecuted. That's a criminal offence. Every police force in the country will accept a 999 call on that pretext. If it's taken place, then it's a 101, or many police forces now have the ability to report a crime online. So via their webpage, I think what puts some people off is it says report a crime. It is a crime. It is no different to somebody's house being broken into, somebody's car being entered, or anything else. It is a crime at the end of the day. And a lot of people are sort of wary about, well, I couldn't fill that out because I'm actually not reporting a crime. I'm not quite sure. If you want advice, obviously there's through the Badger Trust, and that's the other aspect, is to report to the Badger Trust through the website page and reporting form. Primarily, it's obviously the police in the first instance, particularly obviously if there's diggers that are out there. What to report if you found a set dug? I mean, Graham described as sort of the hole that's alongside. Bear in mind that sort of a lot of the crime now is blocked sets. So you may find a badger set you've been watching which is blocked with a variety of materials, maybe soft blocked, which is using earth or other materials, rocks, boulders, fence posts, etc. So that's another way of sort of reporting it. And it doesn't matter if it's a day, a week later, we still need to know about it. The only way we can encourage police forces, and Graham will know the battles he's had, particularly with South Yorkshire Police, and I don't mind mentioning them in the respect, is that the battle has been convincing the powers that be that there are problems within the area in relation to badger diggers and people who persecute them. So we need statistics in order to go to senior officers in order to persuade them that actually they do need resources. Up that area is very fortunate. You've got North Yorkshire Police, South Yorkshire Police, West Yorkshire Police, Humberside Police, who probably as a region, probably the most active in the country in relation to badgers and the successes in regards to convictions, which is really good. We produced a guide last year, which helps obviously primarily the police and CPS, but that guide is available to badger groups, and it talks through the signs to look for, what to identify, the legislation. A lot of people don't quite understand the legislation, so training courses that we run help them there. So I run a sort of principle of recognise, record and report, how to recognise a wildlife crime, a badger crime, how to record it on your mobile phone, various other devices. Some people still write notes, don't really get them writing the notes on the back of a fag packet these days, but years ago that was always, somebody be handed a registration number on the back of a fag packet. That was quite a common piece of evidence. And report, and I've mentioned that, 999 if it's taking place, 101 online, or the other aspects, and I should mention, is Crime Stoppers. If people want to report it because they're wary about the people, the individuals, they know the individuals, maybe even a neighbour, and it's always the case, Crime Stoppers is an option. And I can assure anybody that's listening is that if you ring Crime Stoppers and report a crime of any sort, badger crime in this case, your details will never, ever be passed on to the police. The police, it makes it a little bit more difficult when you're looking for witnesses, but at least then the information's being submitted. The Crime Stoppers is an option, but it's not the option to replace the 999 call for the badger diggers that they're there and then.
Okay. Folks, I'm really conscious.
Can I just add something there?
Of course, absolutely.
If people are a bit unsure about whether they should be phoning the police, whether they shouldn't, or don't quite know what they've seen, we've got the helpline, we've got the 24-hour helpline phone. Don't want policemen ringing me in 4 in the morning and saying there's a badger on the road dead, but within sensible reason, it's 24 hours, and we can tell people, well, yes, that's a crime, or it isn't, or what might be happening.
And again, we can share those details in the follow-up email.
We'll put the number on as well. Yes, please.
Fantastic, folks. I'm very conscious that we're just about to wrap up. So, could you, given the context of the evening was all about what we as the general public can do to help protect and defend badgers, what's the one thing that you'd like everyone in the audience to take away? And then I'll hand over to Siobhan just to say her thanks and to wrap up. So Graham, do you want to start? What's the one thing you'd have us all doing?
I think more and more pressure on the likes of members of Parliament and the political side of things.
So right to our MPs.
Regarding the cull in particular, which is, it doesn't involve myself in too much in that at the moment.
Fantastic. Craig?
I think if you're in doubt, report it. If you think an offence is being taking place, report it. You know, take details by all means, but don't worry about it. It is a vital thing, but reporting it is so important.
Okay, brilliant. Ian? Just to stop you having that glass of wine because I'm jealous.
Okay, so our campaigning group of vets, we've tried lots of different things. You know, the latest one was writing to the Prime Minister saying he should intervene in the cull. We've written letters, we've published papers. As far as members of the public's concerned, I think the best thing they can do is write a letter to the president of the British Veterinary Association, asking them why they're supporting culling, even though they don't support the use of free shooting, which of course is what's being used to kill the majority of badgers. So they're in the position where they support culling because the British Cattle Veterinary Association influences them and the economy is stupid. But they don't. The welfare people don't support that because it causes proven welfare harm to the badgers who are maimed, shot, not killed, to an unacceptable level. So they've withdrawn support from the method, but they support the cull using the method. So they know they're in a fudge. They absolutely know that. And I think we should pressurise the BVA. Because if you kick away the BVA support for this cull, it will crumble.
Fantastic. So we'll share those details as well.
Okay.
Dom?
I think it's where I started, really. You know, we are in difficult times. We do see the importance of nature like never before, but we must stand up and we must protect it. You know, it's not just there as our playground. It's there for us to stand up and tell politicians and business leaders and council leaders and anyone that might be damaging it, wildlife criminals and everyone else, that we will not stand back quietly. We will stand up and we'll defend it. And join your Badger groups, join the Badger Trust, support the Wildlife Trust, support the League Against School Sports. You know, do all of the things that you can do to be the eyes and ears in the countryside to turn this disaster that we've created in terms of destroying habitats and wildlife around.
Fabulous, thank you. Debbie, last but not least, by any means.
Well, I would definitely say we've got to lobby this government, like everybody said, and we've got to, you know, keep on at your MPs. We should be following a non-lethal, you know, route by now, which is what Godfrey suggested, you know, and that's what we should be aiming at. So, yeah, keep on, keep fighting, and keep on at all the MPs and the government.
Fantastic, thank you. Siobhan, it's all yours.
Thank you, Amanda. I would just like to add that I feel members of the public need to realise their true value. Every time you're walking in the countryside, cycling or anything else, keep your eyes and your ears open and do as Craig says. You think something's a bit suspicious? Call up South Yorkshire Badgers, East Yorkshire Badger Protection Group or Badger Trust, or just go straight and report it to your wildlife crime officer. It's a good idea to already know who your wildlife crime officer is in your area. So keep your eyes open, do Moor Watch, Rural Watch, Badger Watch, more eyes on sets. Join your local group if you can. You don't have to, you can just be a badger watcher and just a general wildlife watcher, and I think that's where I'll leave it. People, support your other groups, your Wildlife Trust, National Trust, and all other groups if you can also. And let's all try to work together. And of course, do the writing to the MPs, etc. also. Thank you so much to our wonderful panel. Amanda, for your great coordination.
No worries.
Tech support, Dawn. Thank you, you've done a fabulous job. And our wonderful speakers.
And definitely the audience, thank you for turning up. And so we didn't end up talking to ourselves.
I have learned an enormous amount yet again. We keep on learning, and that's another important lesson. Always keep learning. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. We'll follow up with an email either tomorrow or Monday, linking to the recording and with further signposted resources. So over and out from everyone here on the panel. Enjoy the rest of your evening, and those lucky enough to have badgers, blow them kisses from the rest of us, quietly, of course. Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.